Hey yo, what's up, fellas? I got Sage on today again to talk about another pop culture sort of thing. We're gonna be talking about socialist and communist music. You want to introduce yourself, Sage?
Yeah, okay. So, hello everyone. I'm Sage. You can find me on TikTok as Sage7646. The numbers don't really mean anything. I just had to put something after my name. Um, I'm here to talk about music, as Preet said, and today we're going to be talking about a few songs that stood out to us.
Yeah, and you've got some interesting selections. I was mostly focused on classical, socialist music. So, do you want to start first, or should I start?
I mean, I guess we could start first with one of the songs I picked out. And I think this is just one we have to talk about, the Internationale. I mean, the song's been like so important to the movement overall. I mean, the influence of it is felt everywhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been translated into hundreds of different languages. It embodies some of the core contents of socialism and communism. This internationalism that it knows no borders. That it hopes for a better, brighter world without ethnic tension, without these divisions. I mean, it's a beautiful song overall, no matter what language it is. And what language is your favorite version of it?
I'm gonna say the English one because that's the one I can understand the easiest. All of them pretty much convey the same message, even if it's slightly changed up. I mean, the English one, they had to actually redo it just to make it more modern in terms of the language. The one I specifically listened to was one by Billy Bragg.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall.
Who is a British songwriter. He's written a lot of other really good. I mean, he didn't write this obviously, but he's written a lot of really good songs. Like one of them was Thatcherites. There was another one, Never Cross the Picket Line. He's very active with the labor movement even to this day, and he actually sang recently for striking workers at Starbucks.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. My favorite versions of it are either the Chinese version, or there's this one South African version that the YouTuber Hakeem used to use in the background of all of his videos.
Staan op vir waarpas van die wêreld. Staan op uit
And what I like about the South African one specifically is that it's very different from the rest. It's not even particularly, I would say, like stereotypically local to that context. What's great about it is that it's very lo-fi sounding. It sounds very lo-fi. It doesn't sound. It sounds modern. Right, that's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't sound like something from like the 70s or the 60s. It sounds very modern, lo-fi-ish. It sounds like something you would find on Spotify, on SoundCloud from a new artist in her room. And it's got a very soft-spoken sort of style. You want to add anything else? You got the international?
I mean, it's still being sung, of course. Like, as you mentioned, that one version of it was very modern. If you look at videos from the Communist Party of China, or recently I even saw one from the Workers' Party of Korea, they still sing it at their meetings. It's still very relevant to them. And I guess one other version of it that's important is there was one by Tsinghua University. I'm probably butchering that name. It's a Chinese university. And basically they did it in multiple languages, like each line was in a different language.
来，饥寒交迫的奴隶，
And they had different students singing it too, some from other nations, which I think really highlighted the international character of not only the song, but also socialism.
Yeah, and they would even sing it within the Politburo of the Soviet Union. And even as the Soviet Union, towards its like later end, became Russian chauvinist, which it did, and really gave up on its internationalism. That core of what Bolshevism stood for, that core of what communism stood for, still remained in some way through the song, the International. They weren't singing about how great it is to be a Russian or how great it is to be a Soviet citizen. They were talking about how great it is to be a worker of the world, and things like that.
But I guess one thing I'd like to add about the Internationale still being sung in the later years of the USSR, like the symbolism, I think was so powerful that even the revisionists, like, they couldn't break with it or else they'd be deeply unpopular. Like, you see Yeltsin and Gorbachev singing it, and it's like, obviously they didn't mean anything that they were singing. To them it was just words, but the fact that they knew they couldn't get away with anything without at least appearing to be socialists, I think is noteworthy.
Yeah, and it was so important to Soviet citizens because the Soviet Union was such a multicultural empire, right? It wasn't just Slav and Russian, right? The Tsarists extended the Tsars extended the empire way into Central Asia, and there were so many various indigenous nationalities, and that really was the crux of Leninism. It was this idea that you can have self-determination, you can have the right to leave our empire, and of course, racism still did exist, but there were so many some of the world's first affirmative action policies were within the Soviet Union for nationalities. X percent of this person needs to be hired, or X percent of this local administration has to be made up of the local nationality. Things like that really showed that the Soviet Union, even internally, was sort of international, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and honestly, you can definitely see that when they abandoned that internal internationalism, that's when things started to fall apart. I mean, one thing about Gorbachev that a lot of historians don't acknowledge is he would appoint people who had no connection to a region or no connection to a republic as the head of major projects. And that really increased tensions between the different ethnicities because Gorbachev just didn't want to face the idea that we need to respect every different nation here.
Absolutely. I know the Chinese also do something like that similar on purpose, but theirs is a little different. They specifically choose officials that have no connection to a region, so they can't do any corruption there.
Yeah, and I mean, Chinese material conditions are also very different.
Yeah, but China also does have a very similar multi-ethnic sort of country, and so I think that's also why, because obviously the Han are the biggest ethnic majority, and of course all nationalities are sort of to some extent made up. Like if you went like a couple hundred years in the past, most of the people calling themselves Han now wouldn't be calling themselves Han a couple hundred years ago. But it is still a multi-ethnic country, and so I think that is also why the Chinese sing the International, because there's Uyghurs, there's Mongolian,
That is,
Tibetans, yeah. So it is both talking about how beautiful our multi-ethnic country is, but also about the world, things like that.
yeah.
Yeah, are you good to move on to our next song?
Yeah, we could talk about something else now.
Okay, so my song that I chose was Katyusha.
Расцветали яблони и груши, поплыли туманы над рекой, выходила на
Katyusha was written in 1938 by the Soviets during World War II. to sort of rouse like a patriotic spirit. And the song is actually named after their BM-8, BM-13, and BM-31 rocket launchers, which were nicknamed Katyusha. Um, but what I really like about this song is just how majestic it sounds, just how much of a storytelling it has. And the song itself is about a mythical woman called Katyusha who sends her blessings to soldiers out on the front. It's a little bit of a story. She goes down to a river and she sends out her blessings to like people who are fighting off in far off lands against the Nazis. And I think it really just captures the feeling of so many people who were left behind in the Russia while their husbands and fathers and brothers were fighting on the front to defend their country. People in these very isolated villages. Sage, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way to describe it. And music has always been important in wars. Like, it's something that can convey in an easy way, I think, just like, even if it's not a message, the spirit of the war and like why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that's something that we've seen in a lot of other conflicts too. Like we saw in World War I, well, the people who were promoting this song weren't doing it with a good intent. I mean, in World War II, the Soviets had something to fight for, and this music certainly encouraged people to fight for a good cause, but music has also been used to inspire people to fight for pointless causes, like in World War I with famously the song Over There, which is a US song that's just like trying to rally people into the war. I mean, we've also seen, if I'm going to go off of another American example, famously during the Civil War, both sides would often utilize music to the point where my family actually has a record, and it's like supposed to just be containing songs from both sides of the American Civil War. Like the songs were that important that people have just made record collections of them. And I think, I don't believe this one's on the record that I have, but one song from that era that I think was really interesting was there was a song called Dixie, which was a Confederate song, but the Union decided to make their own called Union Dixie, which I think it's a very funny song because it's basically just it's a very triumphant song about just and it's using a song from the South to make fun of the South. Like one of the lines is way down south in the land of traitors, rattlesnakes, and alligators. And then there's another part where they say we're cotton's king and men are chattel to like kind of highlight, oh, this is also the person singing this song was like focused on the slavery that was going on in the South. I think just the fact that that song not only was a parody of the enemy, but also established what people were supposed to be fighting for is what makes that song noteworthy and similar.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the thing about Katyusha. It really talks about why we're fighting. And also, I just think it's funny that the Soviets mythologized Russian launchers, made a song about it,
I mean, the IRA did that too. They had the SAM song for surface to air missiles. It's a pretty good song. It slaps.
To the score. Oh, but now we have a weapon we've never used before. The Brits are looking worried, and they're going to worry more.
But they did the same thing with singing about their weapon systems.
Of course. And I think to some extent it sort of serves the goal of reassuring people that they're safe, right? As long as Katyusha is out there blasting Nazis, you're going to be safe, which is something that you need, especially during a time of war, and I mean total war, which both I think the Irish and the Soviets needed. You want to move on to the next song?
Yeah, okay, so, the next song. This song isn't really all that revolutionary, but that's why I want to talk about it. It's called Wrapped in Black, and it's a song from one of the Sonic games where they sample a Malcolm X speech. Yes, you heard that right. They sample a Malcolm X speech in a Sonic game.
Uh,
And
what does he what parts of his speech specifically?
he's basically it was one where he was using a metaphor with coffee, where he was saying if it's too black, it's too strong, and how the white Americans in power try to basically make black communities less black so they're not as powerful. And the person who made this remix thought it was just about coffee. That's what he claims. But I think it's important to point out this song because we've seen so much in pop culture, people misrepresenting Malcolm X and other figures in the civil rights movement.
Yeah, I would say that's a bit of an um that's an anti leftist song in some extent, or maybe because it takes a lot of Malcolm X's core revolutionary messaging within that speech and sort of just makes it about coffee, decontextualized. But then again, I think, the Sonic series specifically is somewhat leftist, you could say, like, it's always been anti-authority. Eggman is a little bit of a capitalist. It's always been a little bit of a pro-environmental message.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, Eggman was based on Teddy Roosevelt.
but what specifically about the song caught your attention?
Someone made a TikTok about it once, and I was just like, this is so crazy that I have to talk about it
No.
because it's Sonic, so you don't think it's that connected to politics. But I think this shows not only that people misrepresent Malcolm X, but also that even things we consider apolitical have some political connotation. I mean, even the Sonic comic books were changed radically because of a fight over ownership. Like one of the creators, Ken Penders, wanted ownership of his characters. So he basically sued them and they had to change the entire storyline of the comic, which was it wasn't a small comic series. It was one of the big comic series from its time.
Yeah, I haven't heard good
Completely
things about
it.
I haven't heard good things about Ken Penders in general,
Oh
though.
yeah.
Yeah,
He's There are a lot of problems with Ken Penders.
yeah.
Um he's said some really not so good things, like there's a famous poem, First They Came, about the Holocaust, and he swapped all the different groups with different animals so it would fit into his Sonic universe. And I'm very strongly against Ken Penders because I feel that trivializes the Holocaust, and I just can't accept that.
Yeah, I've also heard he's not the easiest person to work with, and his storytelling is mediocre at best, in my personal opinion.
At best, yeah.
Yeah. Moving on, or unless there's something else you wanna add.
I don't think so.
Okay. Moving on, I've got a song called Der Heimlich Umpfermarsch, or The Secret Deployment.
Es geht durch die Welt ein Geflüster. Arbeiter, hörst du es nicht? Das sind die Stimmen der Kriegsminister. Arbeiter, hörst du sie nicht? Es flüstern die Kohle- und Stahlproduzenten.
And this is a patriotic song from East Germany that was based on a poem by Eric Weinhardt set to music. And it's been rewritten several times, but my favorite version is from 1957. And what's so great about the song is it really sets just a tone of how much the GDR was at war with the West, but also how much of a heroic struggle they have against it, how much of an international struggle they have against capitalism, The song even includes a line against NATO that says, "Once NATO is gone, there will be peace in the world forever," which I think is uh, an absolute banger of a line. Um, but really, the way the song starts is what always gets me. It says, "There's a whisper going around the world. Worker, don't you hear it? There are voices of war ministers. Workers, don't you hear it? Coal and steel producers are whispering. Chemical war production's whispering too. The whisper comes from all. Mobilization against the Soviet Union." It really sets the tone of how much the capitalists of the world are trying to sabotage the Soviet project and the workers' project, and how workers all over the world must support the Soviet struggle. Sage, have you heard that song before?
Oh yeah, I have. I think a lot of the bangers come from Germany. I think a lot of the best songs are I don't know why, but a lot of them seem to be German.
Absolutely.
Like even one of the American singers, Dean Reed, who was an amazing musician. Even though he was American, he actually moved to East Germany for his music career, and he found he was able to express his more revolutionary songs much more easily there. And I think, in part, maybe the fact that they fostered such a socialist environment for musicians was part of why the music was also so good, because there's the theme of brotherhood, and as we saw in this one, of defending other socialist struggles such as that in the USSR.
Yeah, yeah, and I also think part of it is because East Germany was at the forefront of just Western interference. Like West Berlin, which was in Western Germany, was the hub of American international CIA agencies, right? It had the most spying agencies in the world at that time, because it was sort of the beginning of the border with the Soviet sphere of influence. So I think there was an anxiety about all the spying that was going on, and what these songs really had to do was just get people excited, or at least spur within them a little bit of resistance against what they were facing, which was this total capitalist onslaught. I also think Germany just has a very long storied history of communist organizing. I mean, I know that communism is so often associated with Russia, but Germany had very strong communist organizations, uh, specifically, through the Spartacus uprising, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. But even after that, the communist movement was still very strong in Germany, led by Ernst Thälmann. I was even, this is a little bit of a side tangent here, if you'll allow me to go on it, Sage.
Oh yeah,
I was
go ahead.
even I was even reading, not rereading, but reading. I work at a school, and we have these little books that we have, and I have some off time, and I'm reading about the Hitler Youth. And there was this one story about this Hitler Youth who got into this nasty, nasty fight with German communist youth. Apparently, there used to be these like absolutely nasty, before in the 30s, before Hitler's rise, these absolutely nasty street brawls with German communists and German Nazis, the upcoming Nazi party. So this German Hitler Youth, he was handing out Nazi propaganda, and he went down the wrong alleyway, and he came in contact with the German communist youth. And what the German communist youth did was they got out their knife and they stabbed the Hitler Youth several times. That was my reaction too. And the book's trying to get me to like feel like so sad for the Hitler Youth kid as he's like dragging himself along. And this is, by the way, like a real story. It's like a firsthand account of a real kid. And he's dragging himself along. He's like knocking on an old lady's house, and the whole time I'm just yelling like, "Die, die, die!" But unfortunately, he survived. So
Oh,
yeah. Anyway, Sage, do you have anything more to?
so much happy endings. Yeah, all right. I guess we could go on to the next one.
Yeah, yeah, we can.
It's United Nations.
Up in the United Nations is more and more resolutions condemning colonialism, racism.
A song from Grenada. And I think I want to point out the importance of Grenadan music with all of this. So, the Grenadian Revolution famously had music as like a central component to it. Like there were many musicians such as one of them, Mighty Sparrow, was very famous, wrote a song Dead or Alive,
The rule of the tyrants decline. The year 1979.
which was basically about all these corrupt Western backed leaders being overthrown. It became so popular that there were instrumental remixes. And however, one song that I wanted to focus on was one by the composer Black Wizard. And this song, United Nations, is basically trying to send the message of how the UN is essentially useless. Like
Yeah.
it talks about how it just condemns and condemns and condemns things but can't stop them. Like one of the lines is, if it can't bring peace, love, and joy for mankind, I find the UN is a waste of time. And another line is the Palestinian man can't find his homeland after mentioning in the song how the UN still condemns Zionism, or at least it did at the time. Yet, it won't do anything to help the Palestinians.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that song is so relevant today, and, a lot of a lot of communist and socialist works tend to be, like, relevant to the modern day era, but I think especially given what's happened recently, I mean, we've seen the UN essentially degrade, and it always has sort of been as just an instrument of US imperialism, where the majority of countries in the world will oppose the sanctions against Cuba, and then America on the Security Council votes against it, and then nothing happens, right? Even though the majority of the world wants the sanctions off, the sanctions stay. Or the genocide in Palestine, the majority of the world wants the genocide to end, and America opposes that, so the genocide stays. The UN really is unable to exercise anything. It can condemn the genocide in Palestine. It can condemn the sanctions against Cuba, but it has no biting force, and that's by design because it's really just held back by America in terms of what it was advertised as, which was like being this mediating force that's able to stop world wars and, trying to stop genocides. That was what it was advertised as, like in the post World War II era. It's a better League of Nations, and it's really failed at its job as that by design.
Yeah, and I mean, the USSR realized that, and they actually boycotted it for a long time, especially over the issue of Chinese recognition, which itself shows how incompetent the UN was. I mean, it took the Nixon administration to get the US to finally acknowledge the People's Republic of China, but during the time the USSR was boycotting, they were like, yeah, this is appalling, it's a farce. And then with the Soviet Union off the Security Council, that was actually, ironically, the one time the UN, or one of the few times the UN has ever actually acted, when they decided, okay, we're going to send in quote unquote peacekeepers in Korea. And obviously it was just a US led attack. It was just a US led invasion. And the USSR kind of realized that, and that's when they got back in the game. But that really shows how the only time the UN ever does something, it's usually just for US imperialism.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and one of the other times that, for example, peacekeepers have been sent is in like Haiti, when the U.S. overthrew the Haitian government. I mean, anytime UN peacekeepers are anywhere, it's more of a tool of American interests than actually changing anything. So, I also, what I like about this Grenadian song is it's got such a funky Caribbean beat to it. It doesn't take itself too
Yeah.
seriously, like a lot of European communist songs do. Like a lot of European communist songs are very serious generally, but this one's more humorous.
Yeah, I think that's what I liked about it too, because definitely the humor is important. And I think just the ability to communicate that is relevant. And I guess one thing I want to say on the subject of communication, Maurice Bishop actually said that the reason why the U.S. considered Grenada such a threat was because the Grenadans spoke English, which meant that they could explain the revolution without translators to Americans. And if Americans saw that, especially if they saw that a nearby predominantly black nation declared themselves to be socialist and were working towards socialism, the US government was worried that that could actually be a threat to them because people in the US would start seeing, oh, maybe we could do this too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Moving on to our next song, Whirlwinds of Danger.
Whirlwinds of danger are racing around us. Overwhelmed forces
This is a Polish socialist song written in 1879, and it was really written in context, like originally, about Poland being occupied by Tsarist Russia. But it's a song that's sort of outgrown that occupation and sort of become more about capitalism and world capitalism itself. It's a song that's been translated into several languages: Russian, English, Spanish, and as of 2017, Burmese. As a Burmese socialist, man used that song while protesting, and he modified it to his local Burmese context. What I really like about Whirlwinds of Danger is that it describes the issues that communists and the workers in general face under capitalist onslaught. It really describes that like tasks that we have in front of us. Like we are fucked if we don't have socialist revolution. Capitalism is a war that is happening all around us. It really reminds me of Rosa's great question, socialism or barbarism. And what Whirlwinds of Danger does is it lays out the barbarism of capitalism happening in front of us and how vital it is that we have a communist socialist revolution immediately.
Yeah, and I think one thing I want to point out is with this being translated into so many languages, I one time listened to a Yugoslavian cover of this song. Um, and I gotta say, it was just very beautiful. Everyone sang it really well. And I think just the fact that people are able to take this into a different context and it's still conveying the same message really shows how this song's been able to endure and not only just endure but also still maintain popularity and relevance.
Absolutely. And I'd like to correct myself. The Burmese version was written in 2010 by Zin Lin. So, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's more relevant than ever now. I mean, especially as we're like on the verge of a pseudo World War III. I mean, it's sort of winding down, but we've seen world conflicts all over the world. We're getting to the most barbaric parts of capitalism with homeless people everywhere, endless wars, endless destruction, climate change.
We're even turning on our own allies. I mean, the capitalist nations that previously got along perfectly are now becoming enemies with one another just for the sake of it, just for the sake of just getting a few more extra resources and robbing those from the neighboring nations.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I think one thing that this song portrays that it didn't even realize, I mean, that nowadays is so relevant is climate change. I mean, like, without environmental justice or socialist and communist climate, you know, addressing, capitalism is going to eat itself through climate change. And that's a great anxiety that I think a lot of us have. That's sort of given this song new context within our current meaning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're definitely right. And one thing that I'm going to predict for the future is a lot of songs are going to be focused on climate change
Yeah.
because that's such an important issue.
Absolutely.
Like,
I mean, we are living in the era of literal whirlwinds of danger as hurricanes like Helene hit us because of climate change. I mean, this is the capitalist whirlwind of danger, right? The era of it.
Yeah, it's just the climate change, the climate crisis has just been brutal. And I'm honestly surprised actually that we haven't seen a whole bunch of songs recently. I mean, maybe they exist and they're just being suppressed. I mean, we had like what, one environmentalist musical and it was the goddamn Lorax. Um, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the future with music
Yeah.
and the relation to climate change.
Yeah. You want to move on to your next song?
Yeah, so this is a German song, Das sind wir aber immer noch, and that translates to, and here we are still. And it's by October Club, and they've produced a lot of really good songs throughout the years. Like, one of them's making fun of the CIA called Lied von CIA. And then their Saigon is Fry, which is celebrating Vietnamese victory in the Vietnam War. I think with Das sind wir aber immer noch, it's such an optimistic song, which I love so much. And then, like, they explain that the reason why they're going on a good path is because workers dare. That's the lyrics they use. And then when they're talking about that path later, they kind of also make fun of West Germany and Western journalists because they say, like, when people started noticing us, the line is, you are walking, but on the wrong path.
That's a really good observation. You were walking, but you're on the wrong path.
Yeah, I think that's just a really funny way to make fun of how they're getting reported on, which kind of ties into what we're seeing with China right now. Like the US is always saying, China's thriving, but what's the cost gonna be? What's the cost gonna be, everyone?
Yeah. Yeah, if the USSR did anything good, it was always something secret or something. There was always some kind of secret agenda behind it too. I mean, it's just the nature of reporting in the capitalist world.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Perenni talked about how every statistic would be weaponized against the USSR. Like, he even talked about churches. If like church attendance was low, it was because of repression. If it was high, it was because of resistance. It was never just people wanted to go to church or people didn't want to go.
Yeah. What do you think stood out about this song to you?
I just really like the style of October Club. And also, one thing I mentioned earlier was just the optimism of it. It's like we're going on the right path by like, and I think the part where they're highlighting how like Western journalists are saying they're going on the wrong path just reinforces that because in Cuba, Raul Castro actually said, "We know we're doing something right when they're complaining." And
Yeah.
I think that message really applies to this song, but even that isn't just like one of the focuses. It's like they also talk about how people were worried that this wouldn't work out at all, that nothing would work in a worker's state. And then they're like, yet look at where we are. Look at how much we're thriving. And they honestly were thriving. I mean, if you look at it, they had so many innovations. They had so many just great achievements there. Like, they even made, this might seem like a small thing, but they even made these beer glasses that wouldn't shatter. And of course, when they were annexed by West Germany, that was discontinued because it was considered unprofitable. And also, when they were annexed by West Germany, there was so much persecution of the East German citizens that the field of like teaching world history at a high school level internationally stagnated because so many of the teachers were from East Germany. So many of the innovators in the field were from East Germany that the field internationally of just like high school world history stagnated because all the teachers were banned from teaching.
This is what they took away from you. Unbreakable beer glasses.
Yeah,
This
that's the more important thing. You know, not like education. I think the unbreakable beer glasses
yeah.
priority.
I mean,
That
return
could be like a rallying cry.
absolutely. That will be our next song, The Unbreakable Beer Glass of Socialism, you know? Actually, that sounds like a pretty good band name, I'm not gonna lie, you know?
We should
Okay.
form a band.
The Unbreakable I don't know how to play instruments, do you?
No, we'll just we'll use AI.
We'll use AI, yeah. Yeah, or, yeah, we'll sample something and put, like, a drum beat over it like most rappers do, Like a
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll be like NSYNC or something, a boy band, hip hop band. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
moving on. My next song is the USSR national anthem, but a specific version, the one sung by Paul Robeson.
United forever in friendship and labor, our mighty republics will ever endure.
And I think why I chose the one sung by Paul Robeson is because his, which was recorded in 1949, really just has like so much emotion to it, right? It really conveys Paul Robeson's experience within the USSR and it conveys how much of a love he had for the Soviet Union, for the Soviet system, and for communism in general, and how much he fell in love with it, right? Because Paul Robeson, he came to the USSR in the 1930s, just on a whim, sort of. He was just simply invited because he was in Europe touring, to film a movie based on the Haitian Revolution that never panned out. That movie never got released, unfortunately. But while he was like visiting the country to film that movie, he just fell in love with the Soviet system because as a black man who had grown up in like Jim Crow America, he felt like a human being for the first time in the USSR. Um, and he would say, and he would defend Stalin and the USSR in the American press. He would say things like, "quote I saw for myself. They all live healthful lives in surroundings, apartments with nurseries containing the most modern equipment for children. I certainly wish workers in this country, and especially the blacks of Harlem and the South, had such places to stay in." End quote. Sage.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this from other African Americans who have been to the USSR. Like Muhammad Ali even remarked how in Moscow, it was the first time where, as a black man, he felt comfortable just jogging in the morning because it was so safe. I mean, the world leaders, or I should say, at least the Soviet leaders, we saw other leaders from the Eastern Bloc welcome African Americans, but even the leaders of the USSR, like Brezhnev, like they met with Muhammad Ali there, showing how he too became enamored by the Soviet system. And if you look at what he actually says about it, a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was a country that wasn't racist. I mean, sure, you might encounter occasional racism in the USSR, but the USSR was a society that was systemically anti-racist. Like the US is a system that's systemically racist. Like everyone who lives here knows that. I mean, everyone here knows about the police brutality, even the people who don't say they do. I feel a lot of them are just trying to deny it to themselves. But the USSR was like the exact opposite of that. And I think it's important again to note that Paul Robeson he was really important. He was like a major figure in America to the point where today there's a portrait of him in the Smithsonian. It's a very interesting portrait. I saw it myself when I was there, and I think it's interesting how they have a short biography of him, but they try to mitigate as much as possible his communism.
Yeah,
This is what they write about it. This is what they
go
write.
ahead.
Robeson's left-wing sentiments became a focal point of anti-communism in the post-war era, and his passport was revoked in 1950. His American career largely came to an end, and then, notice how they say left-wing sentiments. They won't say communism. They'll just say left-wing sentiments.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is that Paul Robeson was such a famous figure within American the American music scene, and he's largely been forgotten from history and written out of history books because of his communist leanings. I mean, he was friends with major black figures like Jackie Robinson, and he was connected with all of the famous people that we know today from that era. But he's been written out because of his communist leanings. Um, and also, going back to what you said, I think the difference between the USSR and the USSR system and the American system was that America had de facto and de jure racism. So de facto is it's written into law, and de jure, oh no, de jure is it's written into law, and de facto is like also unofficial racism. The USSR had no de jure racism. All the structures were against racism, and it had a little bit of de facto racism. But whatever it was trying to be combated as like a remnant of the past, things like that.
Yeah.
You want to move on?
Yeah. So the next song, I might have some trouble pronouncing this one. Um, Pathe okay. Pathe Orangel Butha Kalengal. Okay, I probably said that completely wrong.
That sounds perfect. I bet that's how exactly they pronounce it.
The hesitancy too. That's part of it too. Is like how to make sure you have the hesitancy when saying it. And you gotta like repeat the word like 3 times. All right, we're not gonna repeat the name, or at least I'm not gonna repeat the name of this song. But what I want to point out is one, this song famously for the cover for it on YouTube, it boasts about having 5 million views, which for a communist song is a lot. There have been multiple remixes of this that have also gotten a good portion of views that have gotten a lot of attention. I think the reason why this grabbed my attention was because it was such a popular song compared to other communist music. And I mean, it's from Kerala. Is that I feel like I'm butchering that too.
Kerala,
CH.
Kerala.
Kerala, yes. My apologies. I'm really bad with this shit. Yeah, but I think it's important to note that that region has this history of communism and an appreciation for it that enables these songs to become popular.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it has a strong ruling communist party that's a little bit reformist, but Kerala boasts one of the best living standards in India.
I
Life
think it might be
standards.
the best, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even reformist communism works. I mean, what can we say?
And I mean, their housing projects have been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and also the people there are very proud of their communist party and their communist tradition. I mean, there's hammers and sickles everywhere, everywhere.
Everywhere. I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, yeah. At the bus stops, in the sea. There's just
Oh, I've seen the
yeah.
bus stops where it's like the actual stop, like the bench has a hammer and sickle on it,
Yeah, the bench
like
is
on the
built.
sides.
The bench is built out of two hammer and sickles. Like, yeah, yeah,
It's the coolest thing.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think the lyrics that really stood out for me were not church or mosque, but thousands of schools should be built. And then what is the cast of a crying baby? I think those lines are very important, especially in the current more reactionary climate in India.
Yeah, especially with the BJP, Modi, especially with the heightening caste contradictions, preaching about like a casteless, religionless society, or at least a society where there's no discrimination on caste and religion, is so important with
Yeah.
the modern day India.
And I think even for Americans, I think Americans need to start understanding the issue of caste because I know people who have actually encountered caste-based discrimination within the US. like, it's become a thing here because unfortunately, I mean, there are some people within immigrant communities who bring those reactionary ideas with them. But since the US has no legislation preventing discrimination based around caste, those people who take advantage of caste for unfair hiring practices end up harming American society too.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what's so insidious about caste is like on paper, there is no way you can get out of it. Like at least on paper, theoretically, in a capitalist society, because casteism is really a remnant of feudalism and feudal ways in India. At least on paper, within capitalist society, you can become a billionaire or break out of your class rank. There is like on paper a little bit of equality there. With caste, the last name you're born with pretty much just determines who you are for the rest of your life, and there's no amount of money or anything you can do to break out of that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you know. Moving on. My next song is Cholima on the Wing. And it's a song from the DPRK. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Koreanized version of it. And what I love about this song is that it is so synthy, it is so 80s, it is so poppy.
Yeah, Korea has a lot of music like that.
I know. It's just so. It reminds me a lot of what everybody loves about J-pop, and you gotta listen to
Yeah.
Cholima on the Wings. It's just absolutely beautiful, and also there's this very orchestral chorus that blends with that J-pop sound. I don't want to say it's necessarily inspired by J-pop, but this very poppy 80s sound is also helped by this chorus that's just so loud and ringing. Cholima is there's a lot of it's really hard to find information about Cholima specifically, Cholima on the Wing. What I do know is that it was based on the Cholima movement, which was founded in the 50s in Korea, and Cholima is named after a Chinese mythological flying horse, and that was really strong, and the horse helped out its comrades. The Cholima movement specifically was about energizing the Korean people to rebuild their country after it was completely destroyed after the Korean War. So the Cholima movement is really about just Kim Il-sung trying to motivate the Korean people to keep on fighting, rebuild their country, especially after almost everything was destroyed.
Yeah, I think you can also see that they clearly succeeded. I mean, if you look at Korea today in the north, I mean, the south is basically an American military base. It's just a giant American military base. So you can't really talk about standard of living there because no one there really has any sovereignty. I mean, some people have a higher standard of living, you could say, but that ignores the millions of children being abused in not millions, or I should say hundreds, that's a better number, I think, for the children being abused in South Korean orphanages. There's, of course, the people who work in practically slave-like conditions, and that's also in the hundreds, if not thousands.
High suicide rates.
High suicide rates. It's a very terrible place, despite the fact that they'll always show you the nice skyscrapers there. But if you look at Korea, the actual Korean government, the place administered by the real legitimate government of Korea, you'll see that what they have there is so much better than what they had right after the war. Because, yeah, they were basically bombed out of existence. There was like pretty much no housing or anything. And now, I mean, just in the past couple of years, they've been like making whole new towns. And I mean, these towns are rather small towns, but the fact that they're able to do that while completely sanctioned is something that needs to be appreciated.
Absolutely. I mean, the DPRK is one of the most sanctioned countries on earth, it's even illegal for it to trade with its neighbors, like China. I mean, it's absurd. And especially after America completely destroyed this country, something like, I believe, like 90% of the buildings in Pyongyang were destroyed by the end of the war. 20% of Korean civilians were killed. American fighter pilots reported that they didn't even have any more targets left, just to give you a grasp of how much of Korea was destroyed. And I feel like a lot of the narratives around the Korean War are very similar to Israeli narratives around October 7th, like, oh, they started it first, things like that, where it just ignores a lot of the history, where there were conflicts on both sides. And really, Korea was just the DPRK was really just trying to reunite its country from what was essentially American military occupation under a dictatorship. So,
Yeah. I mean,
oh no, go ahead, Sage.
I was gonna say that with Korea, we've also seen other music of theirs play at least not, I don't want to use the term major when I describe this, but at least a role in modern affairs. Like on TikTok, that one Korean song about Kim Jong-un, Friendly Father, went viral a little while back.
Yeah. I mean, the DPRK has bangers. What can we say? Absolutely, they're cooking in that country. What I like about Chima too is like it's so energizing. You know, you can absolutely feel yourself getting energized to rebuild a completely destroyed society. Which
I mean, there's another song like that they have called "People's Power," which is also just a very energizing song. And I think. Just that sense of energy is important when you're rebuilding a nation.
Yeah, you need that energy. You need that sense of solidarity with your fellow man. And I think there's a lot of things about the DPRK that are odd to us from outsiders. But I really think one thing about East Asian collectivist societies that I really always appreciate, and this goes for Japan, things like that, like all these societies, China have had a collectivist culture, and you know, capitalism has slowly but surely eroded it, but it's still there, is that you give 100% of your effort to help out other people, and the expectation is that they're also going to give 100% of their effort to help you out, right? So it's almost like all of society is a safety net around you, like you're all working towards a common goal of helping each other out, whereas like in the more individualistic society, you know, you'll give like 10% of your work and collect your paycheck. And for obvious reasons, I mean, under capitalism, work is alienating, and you know, you don't own the products of your own labor. But then your boss abuses you, and then the person you're serving doesn't get anything, you know, things like that. Like whereas in these collectivists,
and I mean, even the boss, like with them, even their situation is precarious. I mean, even they have, depending on like what level they're on, I mean, obviously there are some bosses who are able to make their position more stable through government subsidies. That's a big factor, and just total monopolies. A lot of these bosses who are exploiting people, they themselves, I mean, aren't doing that well because they can only focus on themselves. Everyone else is focusing on themselves too. I mean, the person who runs either a small to medium-sized business, they could go down under like next week. So they're just going to be focused on, like I've been saying, themselves, because that's what we're conditioned to do in capitalism, and that's how the system's structured.
Yeah, and also I think there's just no more community within individualism. I mean, within individualistic cultures of the West, you used to have a little bit sense of community around your town. You know, you used to know your local shopkeeper and things like that, but that's been completely eroded. And that's the thing that I appreciate about Cholima, is that it gives us connectivity amongst our fellow peers, and it gives us energy to keep on fighting against American imperialism, because the Korean people, even though they suffered so many losses and, they had to be helped out by China, obviously, they did accomplish something that was unimaginable, and that was win or at least hold their ground against American imperialism. I mean, that's an amazing feat, right? Like in of itself, survive against such a behemoth.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah. Well, here's my favorite lyric. Let's go quicker. Let's go faster. Riding on Chalima. Let's create new miracles, new creativity and innovation. Let's make a happy paradise for the coming generations. I think that's the line that really stood out to me. It's
Don't they say something also like we go through whole decades and days
I don't remember.
or something like that?
I don't remember if they did, but I think like the whole goal of the song is just let's sacrifice now so our children and grandchildren can live in prosperity. And I think that's what the North Koreans of the 50s did. They sacrificed, and now nobody within the DPRK is living within that hellscape that was created by America. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah. I mean, they had setbacks during the 90s when they were cut off from everything, but they've certainly achieved just like so much. They are definitely living in a better society now. And, well, obviously I can't visit them. The US government would arrest me for treason if I tried that. I definitely get the impression that most people are comfortable with the way things are going.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you could figure it out. But anyways, I also think this song is important these days just because, I mean, we need community, and also we need hope that we can defeat American imperialism. We need hope that we can build a new society. And within capitalist society, nobody really thinks about the future generations. I mean, we're not really building anything for our future children except death and destruction, climate change, a dying world, essentially,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can move on to the next and last song if you don't have anything else.
No, yeah, we're good.
All right. So the last song is Sail Along Jama Hareya, which is this song about Libya during the era where Gaddafi was leading it and when they were building socialism. This was actually published by the broadcasting department of the socialist Jamahiriya in 1980.
Jamahiriya, 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 sail along, Jamahiriya.
And it was basically, I think what makes this stand out to me is the fact that it was written and sung in English, despite being a song about Libya. And something we've been talking about a lot today is internationalism. And I think that's in part what this song had something to do with.
Yeah, I think what the Grenadans and Libyans understood in this context was that English is sort of an international language, whether we like it or not, that almost anybody on Earth can understand. So if you want to get your message out, it should also be in English.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great song. It's another one that's very energetic. It feels like it's from 1980. And just the person who's singing it, I could imagine them being like really enthusiastic and like smiling as they sung it. I mean, I could imagine them playing this song at a club, honestly. Like, it would slap if they did that.
Right.
But one of the lines is...
Oh, go ahead.
One of the lines I want to point out is the Libyans are all satisfied, which I think highlights what the goal of socialism is. It's not just to create a system where people thrive, but also to create one where they are satisfied, one where they feel that the system works for them, one where they feel that what they're doing is right, and one that doesn't just feel like it's serving them and it's by the people, but also one that actually is, because in my opinion, that's the only way you can create satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is this need amongst a lot of communists to make sure that, or, like leftists in general, to make sure that experiment is following X, Y, and Z, and it's going according to plan, and that's not revisionist, and that's following the original plan laid out here or there. And yeah, I mean, that's important. Of course it is. It's important to a large extent. I'm not denying that. But there's also a human aspect of socialism, like on a day-to-day life, that I think is so often ignored. Like, no matter how much you hate the USSR because it had this or that, or you believe it was state capitalist, it still achieved amazing things on a basic human level. That can't be ignored. And the same thing with Gaddafi's Libya.
Yeah. And I think the human aspect is incredibly important. I mean, just incredibly important. Like, the whole focus on the human being, and just like, I guess you could almost say humanism, like, that appeal is what got the revisionist in Czechoslovakia forward so much. They said it was socialism with a human face, and they were able to really take advantage of that, which with the human factor and just appearing human, which led them to take power and have an increased appeal to people. I think that it's important to recognize that while they had that, honest socialists who aren't revisionists need to also take advantage of that and really work to build a society that appeals to the people.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think it's just like when somebody's like completely ignoring the human aspects of socialism or the successes of past socialist experiments in terms of improving the lives of citizens, things like that. Sometimes it just makes me question, like, why did you become a socialist or a communist in the first place if it was not to help out millions of people, if it was not to improve the lives of people? And for some people, I think really they became communist or socialist because they wanted to feel intellectually superior. And that is really just sort of for some people, really, socialism and communism is the reason they became it is so that they could have sort of an intellectual superiority and an intellectual feeling of superiorness to their fellow people. In that I read Das Kapital, and I understood it better than even people who've practiced socialism or something like that, or people who have practiced communism. And I'm so much better than you. I'm so much better than even the masses. And people who fall into that, I think, isolate themselves from the very people that they're even trying to help out, which is the masses. I mean, that's the goal of communism, things like that.
I mean, it really comes down to that quote, "The people are my God," which was a quote by I think it was either Kim Il Sung or Kim Jong Il. I'm gonna look up which one of them said it.
And I will cover for you. No, I will cover for you while you do that. Intellectual masturbation. Yeah. That's what they do. That's what a lot of socialists do. They just want to be feeling superior to everybody else and want to look down on everybody else in this weird little circle where they smell each other's farts, disconnected from the masses, where they even feel intellectually superior to the masses and other socialists and communists themselves.
I got it.
Okay.
Kim Il Sung.
Okay. Nice. Okay.
Go on.
No, that's it. So do you want to talk about the importance of just communist music in general, socialist music in general, like why we need it?
It's not just for the reasons we covered here. I mean, we talked about already a lot of the reasons, and I think one important thing is it's a good way to convey a message to people, and also music has always been a way to motivate people as well. Like, even in ancient times, there were just the war drums, where, you would play the drums before war and during the battle to get people energized, to get people ready to go into battle with the neighboring tribe or something like that. But obviously, while we're not doing anything like that, we still understand that that's a useful tactic that could be used for good. Like, at protests, people will be doing music sometimes. Even the chants have a rhythm to them. So even in the stages where you're just like trying to build a movement and trying to build a base for a struggle, and you're just doing protests in the streets, you still need to have rhythm basically to do that, if not music. Like, people need to have rhythm if they're going to be doing chants. And chants are the best way to convey slogans during protests, because during a protest, basically what you want is you want to convey your point simply as possible. And then also, music can show other people, like other nations, what your intents are. Like with the Libyan song I brought up, that was intended for foreign audiences, so they would know this is what Libya is all about. I mean, even with national anthems show everyone these are our key values. This is what our country believes in. This is what we strive for. This is a bit about our history, perhaps. And just also, like we talked about Chima on the Wing, with that, it's just like, even when just like building socialism with state power, these songs can serve to motivate people to take part in that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with everything you said. I mean, music is a good way to just get your ideas out. I mean, theory, I will never not stop denying the importance of reading theory, but not everybody in society has time to read theory. Some people are busy, some people are uneducated, some people can't even fucking read, you know? And so
Oh yeah.
music just helps just very simply, in a very simple way, get out our messages across to as broad of a section of society as possible. It breaks down complex concepts. Music is something that's universal to humanity. I mean, and it's a very human thing. I mean, I think a socialist or communist movement without music is a very sad movement overall. I think if you want to have a socialist or communist movement, you have to bring a little bit of humanity into it. You have to have a little bit of fun. And music is all about that. Uniting people, having fun, getting out messages as simply as possible, and uniting people as quickly as possible, especially when you can get a banger that gets stuck in people's head. And of course, there's so many people who got interested into communism because of, say, the Red Army Choir. Or, because they heard a really cool song from a socialist experiment, and they decided to go further
Rage
into it.
Against the Machine, they've even had in some of their CDs, they've had like lists of like books and articles for theory for people to people to read, which has actually led people to socialism.
Yeah, they've got Lenin in their reading list. They've got Castro in their reading list. I mean, Rage Against the Machine. And of course, we could get into the concept of the fact that a lot of conservatives thought the Rage Against the Machine were actually preaching about conservatism. And they felt that Rage Against the Machine recently had become somehow leftist and woke, when in fact they were always woke. That's why I think you have to be a little bit careful with your messages. Though I don't think Rage Against the Machine really tried to hide how leftist of their message was and how openly communist it was. You always have to make sure that your message is getting through clearly in your music.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
we talked about that in the sci-fi one with Star Wars.
yeah.
And so everyone listening to this, I'd say check that one out. It's I think we did a pretty good job talking about that topic too.
Yeah, it's been lovely having you on, Sage.
Could I say one more thing?
Yeah.
One more thing I forgot to add. This is pretty important, that these songs also remind us of what our values are. Like with Germany, their national anthem for East Germany, for the German Democratic Republic, it was basically, there was this one song about like unity of Germany, and Egon Krenz one time went to Erich Honecker and was like, why do we still have this line if we're clearly two separate countries? And he's like, I don't see the point of this. And Erich Honecker's like, no, we have that line so we remind ourselves that our goal is to unite our nation once again.
Yeah, I mean, music carries, and a lot of the times it carries that original intent behind these experiments, even when they've gone like really revisionist, like the International in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sage, it's been an absolute treat to have you on again. Check out our earlier episode with Sage on sci-fi and leftism and socialism and communism. Sage, do you have any final parting words, and where can the people best find you?
People can best find me on TikTok. That's really the only place that I am actually active on. They can find me at Sage7646. That's my username, but like the nickname that comes up is Sage, and after that it's all the socialist flags followed by the Palestinian flag. That's how you know it's me on there. I guess my closing remarks are just similar to what I said in our last episode, that if you want to do music, go ahead, do it, and be creative, be a creative person, and make sure you're on the right side of history, and try to inspire someone with your songs. Try to show them a way forward.
We need more fucking leftist music in our modern day age. If you are creative and you are afraid of putting something out, you little bitch, put it out right now. Don't be afraid of the reaction. Don't be afraid of what people think of you. We need more protest songs. We need more communist songs. We need more songs with communist values for our modern day age. We cannot keep on relying, as nice as these past songs are, on songs that were written with specific context. We need more songs for our current age and the issues that face us, especially climate change. Make a climate change song. You little bitch, if you're artistic. Thank you. This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin, I barely made it. And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.